Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So for today's video, we're going to be doing this cute cupcake. I couldn't resist when I found the reference photo, and especially with Valentine's Day coming up. We'll be working with watercolor pencils and colored pencils on top, but you can use whatever medium you have. This video was a little bit longer, so I did decide to break it up into two parts. So part 2 will be coming out on Friday, so make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when that video is coming out. But let's just get right into the video. Okay, so we're going to start with our icing on top of our cupcake. I did take my kneaded eraser and lighten the sketch a little bit. The icing from the picture that we're using today can look a little complicated, but we're going to sort of try to break it down as easily as possible. If you find that you're getting confused where the icing is kind of going, then leave your sketch a little bit darker or only lighten one part at a time. I've got some of the colors that I've pulled that we'll probably be using for the cupcake, but again, everything I use will be listed down in the description below. I'm going to start with my ivory color, and I'm gonna go over most of the icing, but I'm gonna sort of start in the crevices, like where the icing kind of folds over on itself, but I'm gonna almost do like a light layer basically over most of it. I'm gonna sort of leave some of the top edge of the icing, but I want to cover most of it. And again, I'm watching my reference photo. I'm looking to see, where the icing's going, how it's curving. And once we start getting some color into the icing, it's going to make it a little bit easier for us to see, where it's going. So I'm just basically putting this color everywhere that I think I see it in our reference photo. Now you could do this icing in whatever color you want. If you don't want to keep it the white icing, you could do it in pink, purple, blue, whatever you feel like doing. And that'll make your picture just a little more unique to you as well. But sometimes getting, white icing down is somewhat difficult too, so That's why I'm going to show you my version of it. So I'm really just taking my time, making sure I'm really watching where I need to put this color. And again, throughout most of my tutorials, I'm always using, you know, a fairly light pressure. At some points light to medium, but I usually will let you know when I'm switching up my pressure. I always say it's best to start light and work your way towards your darks, because you can always add darker color, but it's hard to really take away once you've added too much. So I'm just looking again at the reference photo and just making any little adjustments before we go on with our next color. Anywhere else I think I want to add it. Okay. So I think I'm pretty happy with that first color for now. So that was our ivory, and I'm going to go in with the cream now. And I'm going to sort of go into the same spots we just put the ivory, but I'm going to concentrate it a little more. So the ivory, I kind of laid it out in a bigger area, and the cream, I'm going to sort of put it in a small area, really where the shadows and the crevice of the icing is. And this is going to make that pop. So I'm going to be just a little more specific with this color. And this first layer is basically just blocking everything in, so we can always go in and adjust with our next layer. So if you're not quite happy the way the first layer turned out, that's fine, that's okay. We'll go in with our second layer, and you know, that's where the fun starts to happen, because you can really start to work on the details, work on your lights and darks, you know, start to make the piece your own. And I always suggest, you know, with tutorials, if it's the first time you're working, you know, with the medium, or the first time you're doing the subject, or even if you're unsure, I always say watch the tutorial complete the first time from start to finish. And then the second round, you know, try it on your own, and you have that video there to help guide you if you need it still. Okay, so I like how that's starting to look. Now I'm going to go in with my warm gray 1, and I'm pretty much going to cover most of the rest of the icing with this. I'm just going to leave some light, you know, try to leave like a light highlight along the edge of some of the icing where it's a little bit brighter, but I may also come back in with just my white colored pencil at the end of when we're done this illustration, and use that for those sort of white highlights too. So we'll see. But I'm basically gonna just cover the rest of the icing with this, the warm gray 1. And don't be afraid to take this color over top of the other colors we laid down too, because some of them are in a little bit of a shadow, so they're going to be a little bit more muted. So we can layer them up. Move those up there a little bit so they're out of my way. So the icing's still looking pretty light, but once we get our other dark colors in there, it's not going to look so light or dark right now because it might look off to you. But once we start getting our other colors in, then we'll get a better idea of what the icing will look like. So I'm going to take my warm gray 3, and I'm just going to hit a couple of places where it's like really in shadow, a little bit darker. So like in here. And I'm doing a pretty light pressure. And we want to make sure our shadows are dark enough because that's going to help form our icing. I may split this tutorial into 2 tutorials just because I feel like this is going to be quite a long tutorial, and I don't know if people want to watch, you know, a 2 or 3 hour video. I'm not sure exactly how long this is going to end up being, but I'm assuming it's probably going to be at least 2 hours. So I may upload it into 2 videos, but we'll see. Or I may try uploading it, you know, as it is and see if people still watch it. If not, then the next time I have a long tutorial like this, then I might split it up. We'll see. I'm just sort of, you know, as I'm putting out this tutorial and all the ones I'm doing now, it's sort of like a trial and error to see what people want to see, what kind of content you want. But I really enjoy doing the real-time ones because I know personally for me that's what I like to watch, you know, when I have time. So I hope you're able to see as we're doing these layers here, I can already start to see the icing taking shape. So we're almost done with the icing. And again, I'm just taking a little last look at my reference photo, making sure I've got all the spots that I want. Okay, so I like that. And then I'm just going to take that ivory color again and just sort of go over all the spots again to sort of blend everything together. And this is just going to help add a little bit of warmth to the icing as well. And I'm trying to keep those spots that I had where I had left like tiny bits of whites. I'm trying to keep that as well. Okay, and I'm just going to take that warm gray again and just go right in here because I just noticed I missed this part. I'm just going to put a little shadow in here. Okay, so that's our icing, and now we're going to move on to the hearts, and then we'll blend everything out and move down to the cupcake part. So for our hearts, I'm going to go in with coral, and I'm just going to cover all of the hearts with this. This is just going to be a nice light base layer. And actually, before I do that, because I didn't lighten them up, I am going to take my kneaded eraser and I'm just going to lighten up the hearts because I left those a little bit darker so I would have some good reference points for where the icing was going. Now you don't have to be too super precise erasing these because we are going to be putting a darker red color down as well. But I like to avoid seeing my graphite lines through them as much as possible. But if we see them, we see them. Okay, so I'm just going to continue on with that coral and just cover all of these hearts with just a nice light base layer. Now, as I mentioned in my other watercolor pencil tutorial of the cherry, I don't have to keep my pencils super sharp with the watercolor pencils unless I'm trying to get in and get some specific detail. So I usually keep a blunt point with these because the water really helps get the pencil into the tooth of the paper anyway. So it's not like with colored pencils where, you know, sometimes it is better to keep a nice point to the pencil because it's easier to get it into the paper, but with watercolor pencils it's not as specific to have such a sharp point. Okay, so we've got our base of the cherries in. And then I'm going to go in with my darker color first. So we're going to use the burnt carmine and the pompeian red pencil. But I'm going to go in with the burnt carmine first and just do my darkest areas first. And then we'll go in with that on top. So I'm just going to put this in the spots where I really see that dark color. Now I'm trying to be a little more specific with this color and a little more light-handed because it is a very overpowering color. So I'm really trying to get it just in the spots where I want it. And if you get it a little too much all over the place, well, that's fine. You just have little darker hearts. No big deal. So I'm constantly looking at my reference photo to try to figure out where I need to put these colors. So I'm not putting them willy-nilly, because if I start putting, you know, some on this side, some on this side, then the light from the reference is sort of messed up. Then we don't have a true light source anymore. If you just kind of put the color wherever you want it to. Now, if that's what makes you happy, go for it. There's nothing wrong with that. But I want this to look, you know, somewhat realistic. So I'm trying to always follow that same light source. And if you don't have the exact same colors, that's fine. Use whatever colors you have. I always say, you know, try to have 3 colors, like a light, medium, and dark. But if you only have 2, use a light red and a dark red for your lights and darks. Use what you've got. Okay, so now we're going to go in with that pompeian red. And I'm going to cover the rest of it and sort of blend it into the dark part a little bit. Because I don't want there to be like a clear two different reds, we're going to sort of marry them together. And I'm just going to go over the dark one as well. Maybe not all the way through the dark, just depends. But I'm definitely overlapping these two colors. Okay. So now we're going to go and use our water brush, or your, if you have, a regular watercolor brush, you can use that with a jar of water. But I'm going to go ahead and use these. We're just going to get this wet, and I'm going to start with the icing part. And I'm going to take it from light to dark and sort of work that way. And I'm going to try to be careful around the hearts for now, because I don't want to drag that red color in. And what you could do is you could do your icing first completely, blend it out, then do your hearts, and then blend that out, so you have less risk of sort of dragging the colors into each other. I'm just going to try to be as careful as I can. a little bit more water. Okay, so now I'm going to go in and do our little hearts. And for these, I'm taking my time, trying to make sure I don't bleed the color into the icing too much. It's okay if it does a little bit, because it will just look like the color from the hearts is being reflected into the icing. But I want them to keep their shape. Okay, so that's the icing and the hearts done. And we're going to let that dry and we'll move on to the bottom cupcake part. Okay, so we're going to start working on our cake part now. And I'm going to take my Caput Mortem Violet and I'm just going to start going in and putting my shadow in underneath the icing here. And I'm just trying to see how far my shadow comes out. Okay. And now I'm going to go in with my Indian red, and I'm pretty much going to focus that on this area over here because it's a little more of a brownish red. And I'm going to overlap it a little bit with the Caput Mortem. And just a little bit up here as well. And a little bit over on this side. Okay. And then I'm going to go in with that matter pencil and fill in the rest, as well as overlap with the other colors. And I'm just going to glaze this color over top of the other colors just lightly. Okay, and then I'm going to go back in with that Indian red, and I'm going to glaze this over top of the red. Now the reason I put the Indian red first in these two areas is because it's more of like a browny red, but this is more of a red right here, but there is a little bit of brownie notes to it, so I'm going to glaze this over top of it so it still retains a little bit more red vibrancy than these areas will. But it's just kind of toning down that pure red a little bit. And then it will also help the whole cake part look a little more cohesive, so you don't have just one area that's a lot brighter than another area. All right, so we'll move on to the cake part. I'm just going to take my kneaded eraser and just lighten it slightly. I don't want to get rid of all of my lines because it is going to be dark down here, but I just want to lighten them up slightly, kind of, and that's why I like using the kneaded eraser, because I just tap it on and it just gets rid of like the excess graphite that's on top of the paper. So you can still see the lines. They're probably quite light for you guys, but I can still see the lines. Okay, so I'm going to start with my cold gray one, and I'm going to do part of the wrapper where there's none of the red. I'm just going to go along the top part here and cover pretty much everything with this. I'm going to leave like maybe just a tiny little couple highlights of white like towards the edges here where it's sort of that U shape. But then as we blend things out, it's going to get covered up anyway, so we can come on top with our white pencil afterwards and redefine that. And I hope you guys are liking this tutorial. I know it's going to be a little bit longer, but let me know if you enjoy that, or if you would rather, you know, keep it to a shorter tutorial, maybe do smaller subjects so it's not as lengthy. Just let me know. Because I could, you know, go over this real quick, leave it at one layer, but, you know, I want more detail to go into this. I want it to be a nice piece. So we're definitely going to go on top and do another layer, but just let me guys know if you don't like this. If I break this up into 2 parts and you don't enjoy that, you just want 1 part. Or if I do break this up into 2 parts and you would rather, you know, one long, let's say 2.5, 3.5 hour video, let me know. Because I will certainly do that. I'll just keep it all together. I'll put all the clips together into one video. That's not hard to do. So I'm just keeping just the top edges of that white, but when we blend it out, it's going to sort of blend into there anyway. But I'm just trying to preserve as much of that little white edge as I can. Okay. So now I'm going to go in with my 142, which is madder, and I'm going to start putting it on this side. So this side of the wrapper is a little more dark, a little more in shadow, but on this side it's a little bit brighter. So I'm going to start filling in these areas over here. And I'm leaving a little tiny white space here so I'll know where to put my shadow in. Now it starts getting more shadowed and more shadowed. Okay, and I'm gonna switch back to dark red 225, and I'm gonna start filling in these areas with this one. And I'm just trying to follow the curves of the cupcake wrapper. Okay, and I'm just going to come back along here and fill in where I see this color, because it's really, once we start to hit here, it starts to get quite dark and you barely see like the red. It's just right on the edge. Now this one, we start to see it on both sides, because this is sort of the transition area from where we start to see this side to this side. So we see the color a little bit on both sides of this one. So if you're having trouble finding where you are on your cupcake, try to find that reference point and kind of see where it correlates with maybe a heart or something like that. And you can kind of see, or you can count out your spaces to see where you're doing it. So the light side's going to be coming from the left-hand side here and on the right-hand side here, because you see the little edges of the paper. So that's where the light's going to catch. And I'm going to make these two just a bit brighter. Okay. And I'm going to start taking this color down to the bottom. And I'm just outlining where the darkest shadow is going to go on the bottom. So I'll know where these little lines need to end. Okay. So now I'm going to go in with my Caput Mortem Violet and put that in where all the shadows would be. Now, because some of this detail is going to be a little bit smaller, you're trying to get into those little gaps. If you need to sharpen this one a little bit more, go ahead. And once we start getting some of this dark color in there, the form of the cupcake will start to take shape. Just looks like lines right now, but trust the process. So it looks like I'm scribbling here, and I kind of am, because watercolor pencils will blend out smoother than just regular colored pencils, so I don't have to be as precise. But depending on the paper that you have, I'm just going to take a smidgen of that madder and just put it right in here just to define between those two spots. It was getting a little too close. Yeah. So with colored pencils, you want to be a little more smoother because it's hard to blend them out more smoothly. But it also depends on the type of paper that you're using. Just going to do the same thing here. Just add a tiny little smidgen of it. And I'm just going to kind of glaze this over top all of here because this is quite in shadow as well. And then we're going to do this bottom part where this was all shadow. And we have to remember too, this is a cupcake. It's just a cupcake wrapper. No matter what angle you look at it, it's going to look different. So if your wrapper is a little wonky or it's not quite exactly like this, it's fine. It's not like it's somebody's pet and one eye is a little bit higher than the other or something like that. It's a big difference. That's a big change. You want to, you know, if you're doing pet portraits and stuff, you want it to look like the pet. This is just a random cupcake, so it doesn't have to be exactly perfect to the reference photo. It's not like, unless you're distributing the reference photo when you show your artwork and say, hey, look at this, you know, then people are going to notice the differences. But if they don't see the reference photos, they're not going to see the difference. So I'm just going to go back in with that cold gray again. And I'm just going to darken up a few little select areas. I'm mostly getting in here where the little pockets are, and then sort of the bottom third of these. And where it kind of caves in, I'm going to start getting that too. And again, I'm just constantly looking at that reference photo just to see where I need to add those lights and darks to make it a little more punchy. Okay. So now we can go back in with our water brush or whatever way that you want to blend this out, and we're going to start blending. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to make sure I get all of that red out of my brush completely. And I'm just going to be extra careful going in and getting where I put the gray. So we tried to leave the very tops around where our cupcake batter is, the cake itself. So I'm just going to go up just to the edge of that and try to avoid that. If yours touches and it bleeds a little bit, that's fine. It's not a big deal. And I don't care if I drag a tiny bit of the red into here either, because the red reflects onto the white anyway, so it's not a big deal. You don't have to keep it 100% clean. Because white will reflect whatever colors are around it, so it's never really or hardly ever really truly white, I should say. So if we pick up a little bit of the surrounding color, no big deal. And now I'm going to go in to the bottom part, and I'm going to do the bright red first, do all that, and then I'm going to go in and do the shadowed part, just so I can try to keep the bright red part as true and bright as possible, so we don't end up muddying it up really. And some of these colors are going to end up bleeding into each other just because they're so close, and that's fine. And if you find you're having a hard time getting in to this detail, just make your sketch a little bit bigger, or make your, if you're printing it out to trace over it or whatever, just print it a little bit bigger. Because the bigger it is, the easier it's going to be able to get your detail. But also, the bigger it is, the longer it's going to take to do. So you have to take that into consideration too. How much time are you willing to spend on the piece? Now I'm starting to pick up a little of that dark color, so I'm just going to wipe it off. Okay. And now I'm just going to go over the other parts of it. And take your time doing this part. And I'm just going along the bottom just to blend them in and get this darkest shadow right along the bottom here. And then get all your color out. Okay, so that looks much more like a wrapper to me. So I hope seeing how I've done that technique, you can see starting with the light and then blending into the dark will keep your light edges. So you'll know, how far or not to go with your darks. If I was just to start at one side and blend all the way to the other side, you're going to lose those bright edges and you're going to lose where you are. And it's not going to look like little grooves into the cupcake thing. So we're going to let this dry. And then we'll come back on top with our colored pencils and do our finishing touches, any last details that we want to do. And then this piece will be done. So for those of you who have made it this far into the video, I thought I would just show you a sneak peek of a couple of my studio assistants. So if you watched my other tutorials, you may have heard the cat meowing in the background. So this is the famous cat, and he's usually content to just lay in his little cat bed there, but it never fails. As soon as I start painting, he will come up and he'll want in my lap and he'll just start meowing to get his own way. And this is another of my studio assistants. So he is content to just lay there in my lap and sleep, and that's all he wants to do, and he's happy with that. My other studio assistant will stay downstairs. He doesn't like to be confined to the art room, so he'll roam around. And if you check on my channel page, I do have a portrait of those two, so they're little Yorkies, and this is Gotham, and Gizmo likes to stay downstairs. So just a little tidbit for those of you that have made it this far into the video. And as always, thank you so much for watching.